The morning sun painted the training ground in golden light, but General Harrison's face was dark with frustration. For 3 hours, his elite soldiers had been trying to hit a target 800 meters away. 13 shots had whistled through the air, and 13 times the target remained untouched. "This is embarrassing," the general muttered, watching another bullet kick up dust far from the mark. The visiting officials from headquarters were taking notes, and not the good kind. This was supposed to be a demonstration of their unit's precision shooting skills, but it was turning into a disaster. Sergeant Miller stepped up to the firing line, adjusting his scope with confident movements. He had won several marksmanship competitions and was considered one of their best. The rifle cracked and everyone held their breath. The spotter called out through his binoculars, "Miss, low and left." The general's jaw tightened. This was the kind of moment that could end careers and close training programs. The budget committee was already questioning whether specialized sniper training was worth the cost. Now they had their answer, and it wasn't what anyone wanted to hear. Corporal Davis tried next, taking extra time to steady his breathing and check the wind conditions. The bullet flew true and straight but somehow still missed the target by inches. The general removed his cap and ran a hand through his graying hair. In 30 years of military service, he had never felt so helpless. The visiting officials whispered among themselves, clearly unimpressed. One of them, a stern woman with a clipboard, shook her head as she made another note. The general could practically see the funding disappearing before his eyes. "Any snipers left?" he shouted across the training ground, his voice echoing with desperation and anger. The question hung in the air like a challenge, but most of the soldiers looked at their boots. They had all tried their best, but the target seemed cursed. From the back of the group, where the support staff usually stood quietly, came a soft voice. "Sir, I'd like to try." The words were spoken so quietly that the general almost missed them over the sound of wind across the range. Everyone turned to look, and there stood Private Sarah Chen. She was small, maybe 5 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulder-length black hair tucked neatly under her cap. Most people barely noticed her during training exercises. She worked in communications, spending her days maintaining radio equipment and updating computer systems. "You?" Sergeant Miller couldn't hide his surprise. "Chen, you work with radios." This isn't about fixing antennas, but Sarah didn't back down. She had been watching every shot, studying the wind patterns and noting how each bullet behaved differently. While others focused on their own techniques, she had been learning from everyone's mistakes. The general studied her for a moment. What did he have to lose? His reputation was already hanging by a thread, and the demonstration was already ruined. "You have shooting experience, Private?" "Some, sir," Sarah replied simply. She didn't mention the countless hours she spent at the civilian range during her free time, or how her grandfather had taught her to shoot when she was just 10 years old. She didn't talk about the boxes of ammunition she bought with her own money, or the shooting journals where she recorded every detail of her practice sessions. The other soldiers exchanged glances. Some tried to hide smirks, thinking this would be the final embarrassment of an already terrible day. A communications specialist trying to outshoot trained marksmen? It seemed like a joke. But the general saw something in her steady gaze that reminded him of the best soldiers he had known. There was no bragging, no nervousness, just quiet confidence. "Take the rifle, Private." Sarah walked to the firing line with measured steps. The weapon felt familiar in her hands, heavier than her personal rifle, but balanced well. She checked the scope settings, noting the adjustments previous shooters had made. Without saying a word, she made several small changes to compensate for what she had observed during the earlier attempts. The training ground fell silent except for the wind rustling through the grass. Even the visiting officials stopped their whispered conversations to watch. This quiet woman who barely spoke during briefings was about to attempt what 13 trained soldiers had failed to do. Sarah settled into position, her breathing slow and controlled. She had learned long ago that shooting was more mental than physical. The target wasn't her enemy. It was simply a destination for her bullet. All she had to do was send it on the right path. Sarah's finger found the trigger, but she didn't rush. Time seemed to slow as she controlled her breathing, waiting for that perfect moment between heartbeats when her body was completely still. The wind had been shifting all morning, but she had noticed a pattern that others missed. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The spotter raised his binoculars, expecting to call out another miss. Instead, his voice came out as a surprised shout, "Hit!" Dead center. A stunned silence fell over the training ground. Sergeant Miller grabbed his own binoculars to confirm what seemed impossible. The target, which had mocked 13 previous attempts, now had a perfect hole right through the center ring. Beginner's luck, someone muttered from the back, but the general held up his hand for silence. He had seen enough combat to know the difference between luck and skill. The way Sarah had positioned herself, the subtle adjustments she made to the scope, the patience in her shot timing, these were signs of real ability. "Private Chen," the general called out. "Do it again. This second shot would be the real test." Luck could account for one perfect hit, but consistency separated true marksmen from weekend hunters. Sarah nodded without speaking and began her preparation again. She didn't seem nervous about the pressure or the watching eyes. This time she noticed the wind had shifted slightly. The morning air was warming up, creating small thermal currents that could push a bullet off course. She made a tiny adjustment to her aim, moving the crosshairs just a fraction to compensate. The second shot was even more impressive than the first. The bullet struck so close to the first hole that the spotter had to look twice to confirm it was a separate hit. 2 perfect shots in a row from someone who supposedly worked with radios and computers. The visiting officials were no longer whispering among themselves. They were staring at Sarah with new interest, making different notes on their clipboards. This was exactly the kind of precision they had come to see, delivered by the most unexpected person on the range. But the general wasn't finished. He knew that headquarters would want proof this wasn't just a fluke. "Chen, I'm moving the target back to 1,200 meters. Can you handle that distance?" 1,200 meters was extreme range, the kind of shot that separated good snipers from legendary ones. At that distance, bullet drop and wind drift became major factors. The slightest error in calculation would send the shot wide by several feet. Sarah considered the challenge for a moment. She had never attempted a shot quite that far during her personal practice sessions, but the principles remained the same. Distance just meant more variables to account for, more patience required. "I'll try." "Sir," she said simply. As the target was moved to the new position, word spread through the base about what was happening. Soldiers from other units began gathering around the training ground, curious to see if the rumors were true. A communications specialist was out shooting the best marksman in the company. Sarah studied the distant target through her scope, noting how heat waves were beginning to rise from the ground as the sun climbed higher. The wind was still shifting, but she was starting to understand its rhythm. Every few minutes, there would be a brief calm period when the air became perfectly still. She waited for one of these moments, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. Patience was perhaps the most important skill in long-range shooting. Rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes at this distance were measured in feet, not inches. When the perfect moment came, Sarah took her shot. The bullet flew through the air for what seemed like an eternity before finding its mark. Once again, the spotter's voice rang out with confirmation of another perfect hit. 3 shots, 3 hits at increasingly difficult ranges. The crowd of watching soldiers began to murmur with amazement. This wasn't beginner's luck anymore. This was skill of the highest level, displayed by someone who had been hiding in plain sight. The general felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. His demonstration was saved, but he needed to understand how this had happened. How had his communications specialist developed such extraordinary shooting ability without anyone noticing? "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Private?" he asked as Sarah secured the weapon. "My grandfather, sir," she replied. "He taught me that shooting is mostly about patience and observation. He said the best snipers aren't the ones who can fire the fastest, but the ones who can wait the longest for the perfect shot." The answer explained a lot. While other soldiers focused on their own performance during training, Sarah had been watching and learning from everyone. She saw patterns that others missed because she wasn't distracted by her own ego or the pressure to perform. The news of Sarah's incredible shooting spread through the base like wildfire. By evening, everyone was talking about the quiet communications specialist who had saved the day. But Sarah herself seemed unchanged by the attention. She returned to her regular duties, maintaining radio equipment and updating computer systems as if nothing extraordinary had happened. General Harrison, however, couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. That night he called Sarah to his office for a private conversation. The small room was filled with military awards and photographs from his long career. But his focus was entirely on understanding this remarkable soldier. Chen, I need to know more about your background, he began, settling behind his desk. 3 perfect shots at extreme range doesn't happen by accident. What aren't you telling me? Sarah sat straight in her chair, considering how much to reveal. She had always preferred to keep her personal life separate from her military service. Sir, my grandfather was a sniper in Vietnam. He started teaching me to shoot when I was 10 years old. I've been practicing regularly ever since. Regular practice doesn't explain what I saw today, the general pressed. You outshot soldiers who trained full-time for these situations. There's more to this story. Sarah hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. I compete in long-range shooting competitions during my leave time, sir. I've won several state championships and placed second in nationals last year. But I didn't think it was relevant to my duties here. The general leaned back in his chair, amazed. He had a nationally competitive sniper working in his communications section, and nobody knew about it. Why didn't you mention this when you enlisted? You could have requested sniper training from the beginning. I wanted to serve my country, sir, but I also wanted to prove myself in other ways first, Sarah explained. My grandfather always said that shooting was just one skill among many. He wanted me to be a complete soldier before specializing. This answer impressed the general even more. Most young soldiers were eager to jump into the most exciting specialties immediately. Sarah had chosen a different path, building a foundation of general military skills while secretly maintaining her extraordinary marksmanship abilities. Well, your secret is out now, the general said with a smile. The visiting officials from headquarters were very interested in your performance. They want to know if you'd be willing to undergo formal sniper training. Sarah's eyes lit up for the first time since the conversation began. This was the opportunity she had been quietly hoping for, but she hadn't wanted to seem pushy by requesting it directly. Yes, sir. I would be honored. There's more, the general continued. They're putting together a special demonstration team for international military exercises next month. They want you to be part of it. This would mean performing in front of military leaders from allied nations. The weight of this opportunity settled on Sarah's shoulders. International demonstrations were high-profile events that could make or break careers. Success would open doors to advanced training and special assignments. Failure would be witnessed by some of the most important people in the military world. But Sarah felt ready for the challenge. All those hours at the civilian range, all those competitions, all those lessons from her grandfather had been preparing her for this moment. She just hadn't known it at the time. Over the next few days, word about Sarah's abilities reached even higher levels of command. Colonel Martinez, the base commander, called her in for his own evaluation. He was a tough officer who had served in multiple combat zones and wasn't easily impressed. Private Chen, he began, I've been hearing incredible stories about your shooting. Before I recommend you for special training, I need to see this for myself. The colonel's test was more challenging than anything Sarah had faced before. He set up multiple targets at different ranges and angles, simulating real combat conditions. Some targets were partially hidden behind obstacles. Others were positioned on uneven terrain that made accurate range estimation difficult. Sarah approached each challenge methodically, taking time to study the setup before firing. She adjusted for wind, elevation, and the unique characteristics of each shot. The colonel watched silently, noting not just her accuracy but her thought process and preparation. When the test was complete, 6 targets bore perfect hits. The colonel had never seen such consistent precision from any soldier, regardless of their training level. He realized that Sarah's natural ability, combined with years of dedicated practice, had created something truly special. Chen, I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to our advanced marksmanship program, he announced. But I want you to understand something. Natural talent got you here, but the training ahead will test every limit you have. Are you prepared for that level of commitment? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Sir, I've been preparing for this my whole life. I'm ready to take it to the next level. The colonel nodded approvingly. He could see the same quiet determination that had impressed the general. This wasn't someone seeking glory or attention. This was a soldier ready to serve at the highest level possible. The advanced marksmanship program was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. Located at a specialized training facility in the mountains, it brought together the military's most promising shooters from all branches of service. Sarah was the only one who had come from a communications background. Her instructor was Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a legendary sniper with over 2 decades of experience and confirmed kills in 3 different conflicts. He had trained hundreds of soldiers, but he had never encountered someone with Sarah's unique combination of natural ability and analytical thinking. "Chen, your fundamentals are solid," he said after watching her first week of training. "But you think too much like a civilian competitor. Combat shooting is different. Targets shoot back, weather changes without warning, and you might not have time for perfect conditions." The training pushed Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. She learned to shoot accurately while physically exhausted. After running for miles with full equipment, she practiced hitting targets while lying in uncomfortable positions for hours, dealing with cramped muscles and mental fatigue. But the biggest challenge was learning to shoot under psychological pressure. In competitions, missing meant losing points. In combat, missing could mean losing lives. The instructors used various techniques to simulate stress, from sudden loud noises to time pressure to scenarios where lives depended on her accuracy. Sarah struggled initially with these psychological challenges. Her natural tendency was to take time and analyze each shot carefully, but combat situations didn't always allow for that luxury. She had to learn when to trust her instincts and take rapid shots that were good enough rather than perfect. The breakthrough came during a simulated hostage rescue scenario. Sarah was positioned 600 meters from a building where instructors had set up mannequins representing hostages and terrorists. She had to identify and eliminate multiple threats while avoiding civilian casualties, all within a strict time limit. As the scenario began, Sarah felt the familiar calm settle over her. But instead of overthinking each shot, she let her training take over. Her first target fell with a perfect headshot. The second and third followed in rapid succession. Within 90 seconds, she had neutralized all threats without harming a single hostage. Master Sergeant Rodriguez watched through binoculars, nodding with approval. "Now you're thinking like a sniper, Chen. Fast, accurate, and decisive." The other trainees in her class began to take notice of Sarah's progress. Initially, some had resented her presence, feeling that someone from communications didn't belong in their elite group. But her consistent performance and humble attitude gradually won their respect. Corporal Jackson, a former infantry soldier with combat experience, became one of her closest allies in the program. "You know, Chen," he said one evening as they cleaned their rifles, "I thought you'd wash out in the first week. But you've got something special. You don't just shoot targets, you solve them." This observation was more accurate than Jackson realized. Sarah's background in communications had taught her to think systematically about complex problems. She approached each shooting challenge like a technical puzzle, analyzing all the variables and finding the optimal solution. Her instructors began giving her increasingly difficult scenarios. They set up shots that required her to compensate for multiple wind conditions simultaneously. They challenged her to hit targets through small openings in walls and around obstacles. They even had her shoot at night using only starlight and thermal scopes. Each challenge revealed new aspects of Sarah's abilities. Her mathematical mind, developed through years of working with radio frequencies and computer systems, proved invaluable for calculating complex ballistic solutions. Her patience, learned from her grandfather, allowed her to wait for perfect opportunities that other soldiers would miss. But perhaps most importantly, her humble nature kept her focused on continuous improvement rather than celebrating past successes. While other exceptional shooters sometimes became overconfident, Sarah remained constantly curious about how to do better. The international demonstration was approaching rapidly, and Sarah would be representing not just her unit, but her entire country. The pressure was immense, but she felt ready. All those hours of training, both in the military program and during her personal practice time, had prepared her for this moment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez called her aside for a final evaluation before the demonstration. "Chen, in 20 years of training snipers, I've never seen natural ability like yours. But what impresses me more is your work ethic and attitude. You're going to do something special at this demonstration." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but she kept it controlled. Her grandfather had always warned against letting confidence turn into arrogance. "Thank you, Sergeant. I'll do my best to represent our training program well." "I'm not worried about the program's reputation," Rodriguez replied. "I'm excited to see how far you can push the boundaries of what's possible. You're not just representing us anymore, Chen. You're setting new standards." The international military demonstration took place at a sprawling training facility in Colorado, where representatives from 12 allied nations had gathered to showcase their latest tactics and technologies. Sarah arrived with the American delegation, feeling both nervous and excited about the opportunity ahead. The shooting competition was scheduled for the second day, and Sarah spent her first evening studying the range conditions. The facility was located at high altitude, which would affect bullet trajectory. The mountain winds were unpredictable, and the thin air would require different calculations than she was used to. Her grandfather had always taught her to respect new environments rather than assuming past experience would be enough. That night she walked the range in darkness, feeling the wind patterns and noting how sound carried differently in the mountain air. The other countries had brought their best marksmen, and Sarah quickly realized she was facing the most skilled competition of her life. The British team included a sniper with confirmed kills from Afghanistan. The Canadian representative had won multiple international competitions. The German shooter was famous for his precision at extreme ranges. But what made Sarah most nervous wasn't the competition, it was the attention. Military officials from around the world were watching, taking notes, and evaluating not just individual performance, but the training programs that produce such shooters. Success here could influence military policies and funding decisions for years to come. The first challenge was a traditional long-range accuracy test at 1,000 meters. Each competitor would fire 5 shots and scores would be based on proximity to the target center. Sarah went fourth in the order, which gave her time to observe how the range conditions were affecting other shooters. She noticed that most competitors were struggling with the altitude effects. Bullets were flying slightly higher than expected, and the thin air was making wind estimation more difficult. When her turn came, Sarah adjusted her scope to compensate for these conditions. Her 5 shots grouped tightly around the center ring, earning the highest score of the first round. But she knew the real challenges were still ahead. The demonstration would include moving targets, unknown distances, and simulated combat scenarios that would test far more than basic accuracy. The second challenge involved hitting targets at unknown ranges between 500 and 1,500 meters. Competitors had to estimate distance, calculate adjustments, and make first-shot hits without the benefit of ranging equipment. This was where Sarah's analytical mind proved most valuable. While other shooters relied primarily on visual estimation, Sarah used multiple techniques to determine range. She noted the apparent size of targets compared to known objects, analyzed how heat shimmer affected visibility at different distances, and even used the time delay between muzzle flash and sound to confirm her calculations. Her systematic approach paid off with perfect hits on all 6 unknown distance targets. The international observers were beginning to take special notice of the quiet American, who was methodically outperforming more famous competitors. But the most challenging test was yet to come. The final scenario simulated a counter-terrorism operation where precision was critical. Targets representing hostages and terrorists were mixed together at various ranges and positions. Competitors had to identify and engage only the threat targets while avoiding any harm to civilians. This challenge combined everything Sarah had learned: technical shooting skills, rapid target assessment, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to perform when failure could have catastrophic consequences. She approached the firing line with the same calm focus that had served her throughout her career. The scenario began with targets appearing at random intervals across a complex range setup. Sarah's first shot eliminated a threat target at 800 meters. Her second took out another terrorist figure that appeared briefly in a window. Each decision had to be made in seconds, with no room for error. As the scenario continued, Sarah found herself entering an almost meditative state. Her conscious mind analyzed each situation, while her subconscious controlled breathing, trigger pull, and follow-through. The months of training had created muscle memory so deep that her body performed perfectly, while her mind focused on tactical decisions. When the scenario ended, Sarah had achieved what the observers later called a perfect run. 12 threat targets eliminated with 12 shots, 0 civilian casualties, all hits within the kill zone. No other competitor came close to matching this performance. The international observers were stunned. Many had decades of experience evaluating military capabilities, but they had never witnessed such a combination of technical skill and tactical judgment. Questions began immediately about American training methods and selection criteria. General Harrison, who had traveled to observe the demonstration, felt a mixture of pride and amazement. Just months earlier, Sarah had been an unknown communications specialist. Now she was representing American military capabilities at the highest international level. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when the German sniper, widely considered the best long-range shooter in Europe, approached Sarah after the competition. "I have been shooting competitively for 15 years, he said in accented English, "and I have never seen performance like yours today. You have raised the standard for all of us." Sarah accepted the compliment graciously, but her thoughts were already turning to the implications of her performance. This demonstration wasn't just about individual recognition. It was about proving the value of identifying and developing hidden talent within military organizations. The success at the international demonstration transformed Sarah's military career overnight. Within weeks, she received orders transferring her to an elite special operations unit, where her skills could be utilized at the highest levels. But more importantly, her story sparked changes throughout the military's approach to talent identification. General Harrison implemented new policies requiring all soldiers to undergo comprehensive skills assessments regardless of their assigned roles. The military realized they might have other hidden talents working in support positions, waiting to be discovered. Sarah's example proved that exceptional ability could emerge from the most unexpected places. The Chen Protocol, as it became known, led to the discovery of dozens of soldiers with previously unrecognized specialized skills. A motor pool mechanic turned out to be an expert in explosive ordnance disposal. A cook demonstrated extraordinary abilities in language translation. A supply clerk had advanced cyber warfare capabilities developed through personal study. Sarah herself became an instructor at the Advanced Marksmanship School, teaching not just shooting techniques but the mental approach that had made her so successful. Her classes focused on observation, patience, and systematic problem-solving rather than just physical mechanics. "Shooting is only half of sniping," she would tell new students. "The other half is thinking. Learn to see patterns that others miss. Learn to wait for opportunities that others give up on. Most importantly, learn to stay calm when everything around you is chaotic." Her grandfather, now in his 80s, visited the base to see Sarah in her new role. Watching her teach young soldiers the same lessons he had shared with a 10-year-old girl brought tears to his eyes. The patience and wisdom he had passed down were now being shared with a new generation of warriors. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," he told Sarah during his visit. "But I'm even prouder of how you've accomplished it. You never forgot that skill without character is worthless." The international success led to invitations for Sarah to participate in advanced training programs with allied nations. She learned new techniques from British SAS instructors, studied camouflage methods with Finnish snipers, and practiced urban warfare tactics with Israeli special forces. Each experience added new dimensions to her abilities, but Sarah remained grounded in the fundamental principles her grandfather had taught her. Technical skills could be learned, but the mental discipline that separated good shooters from great ones had to be cultivated over years of patient practice. Her most challenging assignment came 2 years later when she was selected for a classified mission that required both her technical shooting skills and her communications background. The operation involved coordinating with multiple units while providing precision fire support in a complex urban environment. The mission's success depended on Sarah's ability to simultaneously maintain radio communications with scattered, friendly forces while engaging targets that threatened civilian populations. It was exactly the kind of multifaceted challenge that her unique background had prepared her for. During one critical moment, Sarah had to talk a wounded soldier through emergency medical procedures over the radio, while simultaneously providing covering fire against hostile forces. Her steady voice guided the soldier through life-saving steps while her rifle eliminated threats that could have overwhelmed their position. The operation concluded successfully with minimal casualties and civilians protected from harm. Sarah's performance earned her the military's highest decorations, but she remained focused on the larger mission of developing others rather than celebrating personal achievements. Years later, as Sarah advanced to senior leadership positions, she continued advocating for comprehensive talent identification programs. Her story became a case study taught in military leadership schools around the world, demonstrating how organizations could miss extraordinary capabilities by making assumptions based on job titles or backgrounds. The quiet communications specialist who had stepped Forward after 13 missed shots had not only proven her own abilities, but had changed how the military thought about human potential. Her legacy wasn't just measured in targets hit or missions accomplished, but in the countless other hidden talents that were discovered because someone had learned to look beyond surface appearances. General Harrison, now retired, often spoke about Sarah's impact during leadership seminars. The best lesson from Chen's story, he would say, isn't about shooting. It's about having the wisdom to ask any snipers left, and the humility to listen when someone unexpected answers, yes. Sarah's journey from overlooked support personnel to internationally recognized expert had taken just a few years, but its influence would last for generations. She had proven that exceptional ability could emerge from anywhere, waiting only for the right moment and the right question to reveal itself.